To be born too beautiful in the Qing Dynasty was not a blessing, it was a verdict. In a world built on obedience and silk, beauty was both the golden cage and the blade that polished it. The court poets wrote hymns about it, the eunuchs whispered warnings, and the empresses learned to fear it more than any rebellion. For beauty, in the Celestial Empire, was not simply admired, it was hunted, traded, and used until it rotted under the perfume of privilege. Imagine being born with a face so radiant that it became a crime, not against the state, but against survival itself. In the imperial capital, the standards of beauty were mathematical, almost cruel in their precision. Skin pale as porcelain, because only those who never worked under the sun could afford to be delicate. Lips like painted petals, small enough to suggest silence. Eyes lowered, never wide enough to challenge authority. To be beautiful meant to disappear gracefully, to exist only as an ornament to the throne. Every brushstroke on a concubine's face was a silent promise, obedience disguised as a lure. And so the palace filled with flowers that dared not bloom, afraid that their scent might draw too much attention. The irony, of course, is that the emperor himself was rarely beautiful, but that hardly mattered. His power was the mirror in which every woman was forced to reflect herself. The more she pleased his eye, the higher she rose. Until another beauty appeared, younger, paler, quieter, and the previous favorite was reduced to a rumor wandering the silk corridors. Some disappeared quietly into illness, others into exile. Beauty, in the Qing court, had an expiration date written in rouge. To be adored was merely the first stage of being replaced. The eunuchs, those cautious intermediaries of power, understood this better than anyone. They were the keepers of both secrets and cosmetics. Their job was to preserve appearances, literally. They powdered faces, arranged veils, and whispered the emperor's preferences with the detachment of undertakers describing their latest client. They had seen it all. The trembling hands of a concubine about to be summoned, the silent terror of another realizing she would never be summoned again. To be too beautiful was to be temporarily divine, and eternally disposable. Outside the forbidden city, among the merchants and peasants, beauty was still currency, though less refined. The courtesans of Suzhou and Hangzhou sold the illusion of affection with the precision of a bureaucrat filling a tax form. They studied poetry, calligraphy, and the subtle art of pretending to care. Some became legends, the Willow Mistress, the Moon Pavilion Lady, names whispered with reverence and regret. Yet beneath every poem written for them lay the same truth. Beauty was never theirs to keep. It belonged to the men who purchased it, to the artists who romanticized it, and to the decay that waited patiently for its turn. There were stories, of course, of those who tried to escape their own reflection. One concubine, they say, scarred her own face with burning oil to avoid being chosen by the emperor. Another prayed to the gods to make her plain. In the Qing Dynasty, ugliness was a form of liberation. But the gods, as always, preferred irony. Some women who prayed for protection found themselves too beautiful to ignore and too intelligent to survive. In a society where beauty opened doors only to reveal prisons, cleverness was an act of rebellion. Even the empresses, crowned with phoenix jewels and wrapped in golden brocade, were prisoners of their own reflection. They smiled with poise while plotting like assassins, because every compliment could be a death sentence. The imperial harem was a theater of survival, where beauty competed with cunning, and love was a myth recited by those who hadn't yet understood the rules. To keep the emperor's affection, one needed not only charm but strategy. Perfume mixed with poison, silk embroidered with deceit. And when the emperor's gaze wandered elsewhere, all that remained was the sound of silk shoes retreating down an empty corridor, elegance dissolving into irrelevance. For the common people, stories of palace beauties were moral lessons disguised as gossip. Parents warned their daughters not to be too radiant, not to attract the wrong eyes. A beautiful girl might marry well, or be sold well. In the empire's vast machinery of hierarchy, beauty was a ticket to a better life or a shorter one, depending on who noticed first. The irony that never aged was this: every dynasty worshipped beauty, and every dynasty feared it. Because beauty, unlike power, cannot be controlled, only destroyed. Historians later tried to romanticize these women, painting them as tragic heroines or victims of circumstance. But such simplifications are comforting lies. They were not symbols, they were strategies in human form. Each glance, each bow, each silence was a calculation, survival through submission. Some succeeded, living long enough to fade into the background. Others became cautionary tales, remembered only for their faces, never for their thoughts. Perhaps that was the final punishment, to be immortalized without ever being understood. By the late Qing era, as the empire began to crumble under its own weight, beauty itself began to lose value. The court painters still captured delicate faces, but the eyes of their subjects betrayed something new: exhaustion. The empire's beauty had become a mask for its decay. And when the revolution came, sweeping away emperors and concubines alike, those same faces were erased from history books. The world moved on, leaving behind powdered ghosts trapped in fading scrolls. And yet, centuries later, the same curse lingers. The tools have changed, no longer jade mirrors and rouge pots, but screens and filters. The emperors are gone, replaced by followers and algorithms. But the tragedy remains identical. Those born too beautiful are still trapped by their reflection. They are adored until the audience grows bored, and then discarded for a fresher face. Every generation promises progress, and every generation repeats the same performance. The lighting changes, the costumes evolve, but the script, remains flawless in its cruelty. Perhaps that is the most exquisite irony of all. The Qing courtesan and the modern influencer share the same destiny: to be worshipped as long as they stay silent and forgotten the moment they demand to be real. Both live under invisible empires, one ruled by emperors, the other by metrics. And both pay the same price for the same sin: the misfortune of being born into a world that confuses beauty with worth. So, when we look at those ancient portraits, those serene faces painted with impossible grace, we should not envy them. Behind every brushstroke lies a history of fear, calculation, and resignation. Their beauty was their only weapon and their ultimate wound. To be born too beautiful in the Qing Dynasty was to live as a masterpiece in a gallery of ghosts, admired, possessed, and inevitably replaced. And somewhere, perhaps beyond the reach of empires and algorithms, there remains a question whispered by every forgotten face: was it ever truly a blessing to be seen?